The priest who bathed 4 times a day. Imagine a world where purity was not just a matter of personal hygiene, but a sacred duty that defined the relationship between humans and the divine. In ancient Egypt, this was the reality for the temple priests, men who dedicated their lives to serving gods, whose favor was believed to shape every aspect of life, from the flooding of the Nile to the fate of the soul in the afterlife. These priests were bound by an extraordinary ritual purity code that required them to bathe, sometimes 4 times a day, in cold Nile water, followed by scrubbing with natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate. This was not a casual cleanse. It was an intense, deliberate act of purification designed to remove all trace of impurity, both physical and spiritual. The importance of ritual purity in ancient Egyptian religion cannot be overstated. It was believed that any contact with impurity, whether from bodily waste, death, or even certain types of food, could sever the fragile connection between the human and divine realms. Priests acted as mediators, conduits through which divine power flowed into the world. To maintain this sacred channel, they had to embody cleanliness and holiness. Their daily lives were structured around meticulous purification rituals, beginning before dawn with the first bath and continuing through the day before performing any sacred rites or entering temple sanctuaries. Bathing was far more than a hygienic necessity. It was a spiritual obligation. The Nile River itself was considered holy, its waters a symbol of renewal and life. Immersing in Nile water was an act of symbolic rebirth, washing away not just dirt but the spiritual stains that could accumulate from daily contact with the profane world. Following the bath, priests used natron to scrub their bodies. Natron's chemical properties made it an effective cleanser and disinfectant, but its significance was also symbolic. Its purity represented the essence of sacred cleanliness, able to neutralize defilement. This scrubbing ritual was painstaking and thorough. Priests would meticulously cleanse their entire bodies, paying close attention to details like fingernails and hair. Hair removal was often part of the purification process, as it was thought that hair could harbor impurities and interfere with the priest's sanctity. Some priests even shaved their entire bodies regularly to maintain this ideal state of cleanliness. This level of dedication shows how the ancient Egyptians understood the intimate link between the physical and spiritual realms. The body was a vessel that needed to be purified to be fit to carry out sacred functions. The rigorous bathing and scrubbing routines were embedded within a larger framework of priestly duties in temple life. Priests were not merely holy men in isolation. They were the custodians of divine knowledge, caretakers of sacred objects, and performers of complex rituals that sustained cosmic order, known as Ma'at. This order was essential to keep chaos at bay and ensure the continued favor of the gods. Any lapse in purity could endanger not just the individual priest, but the entire community, as it was believed to disrupt the divine balance. Inscriptions and papyri from ancient Egypt reveal detailed instructions on these purification rituals. The priest's daily schedule included multiple washings, typically 4 or more times a day, each tied to specific temple ceremonies or stages of ritual preparation. After bathing, priests donned immaculate linen garments, themselves symbols of purity, woven and maintained to be free from any stains or defilement. These garments were worn exclusively for ritual purposes and replaced frequently to uphold the highest standards of cleanliness. The physical environment of the temples reflected this obsession with purity. Sacred basins, often carved from stone, were filled with water from the Nile, or specially prepared ritual water for ablutions. The temple architecture included areas designated for washing and changing, underscoring the integration of purification into the daily rhythm of worship. Priests moved through these spaces with great care, mindful of maintaining their pure state at all times. Moreover, the requirement to bathe multiple times daily highlights how the ancient Egyptians blurred the boundaries between ritual and everyday life. The line between the sacred and the profane was carefully managed through continual acts of cleansing, symbolizing a constant renewal and readiness to engage with the divine. It was not enough to be pure once. Purity was an ongoing process, a spiritual discipline demanding vigilance and devotion. This devotion was linked to the Egyptian understanding of life, death, and the afterlife. Maintaining purity was believed to protect the soul on its journey after death, ensuring access to the eternal realm and favor from the gods. The priests, in embodying this ideal of cleanliness, served as examples and intermediaries, their bodies and actions reflecting the cosmic order they sought to uphold. In modern terms, the priests' multiple daily baths might seem extreme, but in ancient Egypt, they were vital to the spiritual fabric of society. These rituals connected the mundane act of washing to the profound experience of sacred duty and divine communion. The cold Nile water was not just refreshing, it was a life-affirming force, a conduit to the gods, and a barrier against spiritual contamination. Understanding this practice opens a window into how deeply intertwined religion, daily life, and the natural environment were in ancient Egypt. It reveals a civilization where physical purity was inseparable from spiritual health, and where every action, down to the ritual bath, was charged with cosmic significance. The priest who bathed 4 times a day was not merely cleaning his body, he was renewing the divine contract between heaven and earth, ensuring that the God's blessings would continue to flow through him and into the world. This remarkable commitment to ritual purity reminds us how ancient cultures viewed the world with profound reverence and complexity. It challenges modern assumptions about cleanliness and spirituality and invites us to consider how deeply symbolic acts of care for the body can shape human experience and belief. The priest's daily ritual of bathing in the cold, sacred waters of the Nile and scrubbing with natron remains a powerful testament to the enduring human desire to connect with the divine through discipline, purity, and devotion. The sand that scrubbed the soul. Imagine a world where cleansing your body was not merely about washing away dirt, but an intense ritual to purify your very soul. In ancient Egypt, the act of bathing transcended hygiene. It was a sacred process intertwined deeply with spiritual beliefs, health, and the cosmic order. Among the many practices they employed, one stands out for its sheer intensity and profound symbolism, scrubbing the skin raw with a gritty mixture of coarse sand and natron. This might sound harsh or even brutal to modern ears, but to the Egyptians, it was a necessary ordeal, a physical and spiritual catharsis. The Egyptians believed that the human body was a vessel that could harbor not only earthly grime but spiritual impurities and disease. The skin, the body's largest organ and boundary between the self and the external world, was thought to accumulate these unseen toxins. If left uncleansed, these impurities could disrupt the delicate balance between the living individual and the divine forces governing the universe. Natron, a naturally occurring mineral composed mostly of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, was central to this purification. Harvested from dry lake beds in Egypt, natron had both physical and symbolic power. Its alkaline properties made it an effective cleanser and antiseptic, while its crystalline, sparkling appearance suggested purity and divine energy. But natron alone was not enough. It was combined with coarse sand, an abrasive agent designed to strip the skin of its outermost layers. This process was deliberate. By physically wearing down the flesh's surface, the Egyptians believed they could release not just dirt but the invisible spiritual filth that clung to the body. The scrubbing was thorough and intense. Artifacts and texts from ancient Egypt reveal that this mixture was rubbed into the skin repeatedly, sometimes to the point of redness or rawness. The abrasion was a sign not of cruelty, but of devotion, a painful shedding of corruption to reveal the true pure self beneath. This was no casual beauty routine. It was a sacred purification ritual, a preparation for facing the gods, for burial rites, or for entering sacred spaces. The very act of physical discomfort was embraced as a path to spiritual cleansing. Beyond the physical, this ritual held deep metaphysical significance. The Egyptians believed in Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth, balance, and order. Purification rites, including this harsh scrubbing, were ways to restore Ma'at within the individual. By cleansing the body of impurities, one aligned with universal harmony, ensuring favor from the gods and protection against chaos and disease. It was believed that spiritual pollution could manifest as illness or misfortune, so the ritual acted as both preventative and curative medicine in a spiritual sense. Moreover, this practice reflects the Egyptians' holistic understanding of health. which integrated body, mind, and spirit. To be physically clean was to be spiritually clean, and vice versa. This was echoed in their funerary customs, where the dead were ritually washed and purified before burial, so their souls could safely journey into the afterlife untainted. The abrasive sand and natron mixture was also used in mummification, literally preserving the body by removing moisture and preventing decay. Thus, the same materials that scrubbed the living clean also ensured the dead remained pure and preserved, bridging life, death, and eternity. Historical records such as medical papyri and tomb paintings illustrate the importance of cleanliness and purification in daily Egyptian life. Even common people, not only priests or royalty, participated in bathing and scrubbing rituals regularly. These practices were part of a complex system of beliefs and customs that regulated social behavior, religious observance, and health maintenance. The abrasive cleansing also symbolized renewal and transformation. Just as the sand wore away the old skin, the individual was thought to be reborn in a state of purity. This rebirth was essential for maintaining one's relationship with the gods, ensuring fertility, prosperity, and spiritual protection. The sand that scrubbed the body raw was paradoxically the agent that healed and protected the soul. In modern terms, such a ritual might be likened to extreme exfoliation combined with spiritual cleansing. But to the Egyptians, it was much more than skin deep. It was an embodied dialogue with the divine, a bodily sacrifice in pursuit of purity and cosmic alignment. This intense, almost painful cleansing was a testament to their belief in the inseparability of body and spirit, that physical acts carry profound spiritual consequences. To understand this practice is to glimpse a civilization where spirituality infused everyday life, where the harsh desert landscape shaped rituals that bound humanity with gods and nature in a delicate dance. It reminds us how cleansing can be a metaphor for transformation, how the shedding of the old can prepare one to face the mysteries beyond the visible world. So next time you think of cleansing as a gentle routine, remember the ancient Egyptians who embraced the grit and rawness of sand and natron, scrubbing their skin raw to purify their souls and prepare themselves for a world where the physical and spiritual were forever entwined. The sacred enema administered at dawn. The ancient world was filled with rituals of purification, acts designed not just for the body but for the soul. Among these, one practice stands out for its intensity and the profound role it played in spiritual and physical cleansing: the sacred enema. In civilizations like ancient Egypt and the Americas, enemas were not mere medical treatments. They were a revered part of religious ceremonies, administered with care and believed essential for maintaining purity before encountering the divine. This was not a casual cleansing, but a deliberate, ritualistic act performed at dawn by high priests and elites, marking a passage from the profane to the sacred. The ancient Egyptians, a civilization renowned for their meticulous attention to the afterlife and the sanctity of the body, considered bodily purity as a prerequisite to spiritual readiness. The body was a temple for the soul, and any impurity could jeopardize one's connection to the gods. The enema, therefore, was more than hygiene. It was a vital cleansing ritual. The process was carefully timed, often at the first light of day, symbolizing renewal and rebirth. At dawn, as the sun rose over the Nile, high priests would receive this purification, preparing themselves physically and spiritually for the rituals ahead. The act was believed to flush out impurities, toxins, and spiritual pollution, making the priest a worthy vessel for divine interaction. Historical texts and archaeological evidence reveal that the tools and substances used for these enemas were carefully chosen. For example, substances like natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate, were common for their cleansing and preservative properties. Additionally, herbal infusions known for their purgative effects, such as extracts from the blue lotus or castor oil, were sometimes utilized. The administration was a precise science, performed with specialized instruments crafted from metals or ceramics, designed for efficacy and to ensure a safe, thorough cleansing without causing harm. The significance of enemas extended beyond individual purification. In many temple rituals, the entire community depended on the spiritual leaders being pure. Priests acted as intermediaries between humans and gods. Any contamination in their bodies was feared to disrupt this delicate communication. In some rituals, it was believed that impurities in the digestive tract could manifest as spiritual weakness or invite malevolent forces. Thus, the sacred enema was a necessary step to fortify the priest's spiritual armor, enabling them to conduct ceremonies that upheld cosmic order and balance. This practice was not limited to Egypt. In the Andean cultures of South America, such as the Incas, enemas were also integral to purification and healing. The Incas believed in the cleansing of bodily humors to align the individual with the cosmic forces of nature. Their shamans and elites used enemas infused with medicinal plants during spiritual ceremonies to prepare their bodies and minds for communion with the divine. The ritualistic nature of this cleansing reinforced social hierarchies and the sacred status of those who performed and received it. Interestingly, enemas also had practical health implications. Ancient physicians recognized that cleansing the bowels could relieve digestive distress and remove harmful substances. Though their understanding of anatomy was limited compared to modern science, their empirical observations led to the belief that a cleansed digestive system supported overall health, longevity, and mental clarity. Thus, the sacred enema bridged the physical and spiritual realms, embodying a holistic approach to well-being. Texts like the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents from ancient Egypt, include references to enemas and their preparations, illustrating how this practice was woven into both medical and religious traditions. The papyrus details recipes and methods for administering enemas, highlighting their importance in maintaining the body's balance and preparing for sacred duties. These prescriptions reveal that the ancient Egyptians saw no division between healing and holiness. Both required the body to be clean and pure. The timing of the enema at dawn is symbolically rich. Dawn signifies the birth of the sun god Ra, the emergence of light from darkness, and the start of a new cycle. By purifying themselves at this moment, priests align their bodies with the cosmic rhythms, embodying renewal and readiness to engage in divine service. This synchronization with nature's cycles was central to many ancient belief systems, where time itself was sacred and rituals reinforced humanity's bond with the universe. Moreover, the sacred enema exemplifies the ancient worldview where the body was inseparable from the spirit. Modern perspectives often treat bodily functions as mundane or private, but for these ancient cultures, the very act of expelling waste was an intimate ritual with cosmic significance. The bowels were not just physical organs, but metaphoric vessels of spiritual impurity that needed cleansing before approaching the holy. This view challenges us to reconsider our own relationship with the body and purification, reminding us that health and holiness were intertwined in profound ways. The administration of enemas also required trust and respect. Only certain individuals, priests or specially trained attendants, were permitted to perform the ritual, underscoring its sanctity. This exclusivity reinforced the social and religious hierarchy, emphasizing that purification was both a physical necessity and a symbol of divine favor and authority. The care taken in the ritual underscored a deep reverence for the body's role as a temple, deserving of careful maintenance. Through this ritual, the ancient elites demonstrated their commitment to discipline and spiritual preparedness. The enema was a daily reminder of the ongoing need for renewal, vigilance against corruption, and dedication to sacred duties. It was not merely about cleanliness, but about embodying a state of grace and readiness to serve higher purposes. The ritual also reflected a broader cultural emphasis on cycles, physical cleansing, mirroring spiritual rebirth, the rising sun marking new beginnings, and the purified body as a conduit for divine power. In modern times, this practice might seem uncomfortable or even taboo, but understanding it in its historical and cultural context reveals a sophisticated worldview that revered the intimate connections between body, spirit, and cosmos. The sacred enema was a profound testament to the lengths ancient peoples went to maintain harmony within themselves and with the divine forces they worshipped. As we delve deeper into the past, the sacred enema challenges our modern assumptions about purification, health, and spirituality. It invites us to see cleansing not just as a hygienic act, but as a transformative ritual, integral to the human quest for holiness and connection. In the quiet hours of dawn, when the first light touched the temples, the ritual cleansing by enema marked a sacred passage, a preparation to face the divine with a pure body and a focused spirit. Thus, the sacred enema administered at dawn stands as a powerful symbol of ancient dedication to purity, health, and spiritual readiness. It weaves together the physical and the metaphysical, showing that in the eyes of ancient high priests and elites, true purification was a holistic process, a cleansing of body, mind, and soul to honor the gods and uphold the delicate balance of the universe. This ancient ritual, preserved through text, artifacts, and cultural memory, continues to intrigue us, offering profound insights into the human desire to transcend the ordinary and touch the sacred. The river that could cleanse, sin, and kill. The Nile River has always been far more than just a body of water flowing through Egypt. It was the lifeblood of an ancient civilization, a source of sustenance, mystery, and profound spiritual power. For thousands of years, the Nile was worshipped as a divine force, a sacred river that could cleanse sin, renew life, and heal the soul. To the ancient Egyptians, the Nile was not merely water. It was a living entity, a connection between the earthly realm and the divine. The river's annual flooding brought fertile soil, ensuring bountiful harvests and survival. But it was also believed to be a purifier, capable of washing away impurities, spiritual curses, and misfortune. This belief in the Nile's holy cleansing power led many to undertake dangerous rituals of immersion and drinking, hoping to be reborn or healed from afflictions, both physical and spiritual. Immersing oneself in the Nile's sacred waters was a rite thought to expunge not only dirt, but sins and curses, cleansing the soul to face the gods anew. This act symbolized death and rebirth, a passage through chaos into order, much like the river itself, which annually transformed the barren land into fertile fields. Yet beneath this sacred symbolism lay a harsh reality. The very river worshipped as a purifier was also a source of peril and death. The Nile's waters were treacherous, its currents unpredictable and sometimes deadly. Many who sought ritual immersion drowned in its depths, swept away by hidden eddies, or dragged under by unseen currents. The river that promised spiritual rebirth sometimes delivered only death. Archaeological records and historical accounts reveal countless instances where pilgrims, priests, and ordinary people lost their lives attempting to purify themselves in the river's embrace. Beyond the physical danger of drowning, the Nile also carried unseen threats in the form of disease. Its waters, while sacred, were often contaminated with parasites, bacteria, and other pathogens. The ancient Egyptians did not understand germ theory, yet they had a complex relationship with the river's life-giving and life-taking qualities. They drank from the Nile, believing its waters held healing powers that could cure curses and ailments. However, drinking contaminated water led to waterborne diseases such as schistosomiasis and dysentery, illnesses that plagued ancient populations and often proved fatal. Schistosomiasis, caused by parasitic flatworms transmitted through freshwater snails, was especially common in regions around the Nile. Symptoms included severe abdominal pain, diarrhea, and blood in the urine or stool. This disease was essentially a curse hidden within the sacred river itself. Despite its devastating effects, the spiritual significance of the Nile's water outweighed fears of sickness. People believed the river's divine nature could overcome these physical afflictions, or that suffering was a necessary trial in the journey of purification. The Egyptians' reverence for the Nile was deeply entwined with their religious worldview. The river was personified by the god Hapi, who was seen as the bringer of fertility and abundance. Rituals performed on the riverbanks involved offerings, prayers, and ceremonial cleansings. Priests conducted sacred rites in the waters, often wearing special garments and using specific herbs believed to amplify the river's purifying powers. These practices reinforced the idea that the Nile was a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of gods and ancestors. This belief system created a paradox. The river was both life-giver and life-taker, purifier and polluter. It reflected the ancient Egyptian understanding of the balance between order and chaos, life and death, purity and impurity. To drink or bathe in the Nile was to accept this duality, to acknowledge the power of forces beyond human control. The river demanded respect, fear, and devotion. There are recorded stories of ritual festivals centered on the Nile, where masses of people gathered to celebrate its gifts. The Feast of the Valley and the Festival of Opet were among events where the Nile's role as a spiritual cleanser was highlighted. Pilgrims might immerse themselves in specific parts of the river deemed especially holy, but these gatherings also brought risk. Crowded shores, turbulent waters, and often a lack of safety measures meant accidents were frequent and sometimes fatal. Furthermore, ancient Egyptians practiced purification rituals beyond simple immersion. They employed natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate, to cleanse their bodies and sacred objects. Natron was used to dry and purify, reinforcing the spiritual cleanliness that water immersion symbolized. However, water remains central as a symbol and medium of purification because it was associated with life, death, and resurrection myths. Osiris, the god of the afterlife, was closely linked with the Nile and its regenerative powers. As time progressed, the perception of the Nile's healing capabilities also evolved. Medical papyri from ancient Egypt, such as the Ebers papyrus, describe treatments involving water from the Nile mixed with herbs and other ingredients, combining practical healing with spiritual belief. The river's waters were used in rituals to cleanse skin diseases, ward off evil spirits, and even influence fertility. Yet, these remedies carried risks due to the polluted nature of the water. Archaeological studies have found evidence of communities affected by chronic waterborne illnesses, emphasizing the hidden cost of living so close to the sacred river. Paradoxically, the Nile was both a source of health and disease, a blessing and a curse. The ancient Egyptians' intimate relationship with the Nile reflected a nuanced understanding that survival depended on navigating these contradictions. In modern terms, the ancient Nile can be seen as an early example of the complex interplay between religion, health, and environment. The spiritual and physical dangers coexisted because the river was so central to Egyptian identity. It was a living force demanding reverence, and that reverence sometimes came at the highest price. The river could cleanse Enin, but it could also silently bring death through drowning or disease. This dual nature of the Nile, holy purifier and hidden killer, remains a powerful metaphor for the delicate balance humans must maintain with nature and the unknown. It reminds us that what sustains life can also threaten it, and that faith, hope, and survival are often entwined with risk. Even today, the Nile holds a sacred place in Egyptian culture, but with a modern understanding of its dangers. Efforts to manage water quality and prevent disease reflect centuries of learning from the river's complex legacy. The story of the Nile's spiritual cleansing and lethal power endures as a testament to humanity's ancient quest for purification and the profound mysteries held in the waters of the world's most iconic river. The purification ritual, before mummification, embarking on the ancient journey of mummification, reveals a profound intersection of belief, ritual, and the meticulous care bestowed upon the dead in ancient Egypt. Central to this sacred process was the purification ritual before mummification, a complex ceremony that went far beyond mere cleanliness. It was a vital spiritual act designed to protect the deceased's essence, their K, from corruption and ensure safe passage into the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians held a deeply rooted conviction that death was not the end, but a transition. The Ka, often translated as the spirit or vital essence, was believed to linger after physical death. This essence required careful nurturing and safeguarding to survive the journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and to exist eternally. Thus, purification was paramount. It was the spiritual cleansing that prepared the Ka for the challenges ahead, shielding it from impurity and malevolent forces. Embalmers, skilled priests trained in these sacred rites, approached the body with reverence. They began by washing the corpse with palm wine, a substance rich in symbolism and practical value. Palm wine, derived from the sap of date palms, was known for its antiseptic properties, which helped cleanse the body physically. But more importantly, it was a symbol of life and renewal. By anointing the body with palm wine, embalmers were not only purifying, but also revitalizing the deceased, reaffirming the cycle of life and death central to Egyptian cosmology. Following this, Nile water played an equally crucial role. The Nile was more than just a river. It was the lifeblood of Egypt and a divine entity in itself. Its waters were sacred, symbolizing purity, fertility, and rebirth. Washing the body with Nile water was an act laden with spiritual meaning. It was believed to purify the body and spirit simultaneously, washing away any residual defilement and aligning the deceased with the river's regenerative powers. This dual cleansing process, palm wine followed by Nile water, was far from arbitrary. The embalmer's ritual was steeped in symbolic acts designed to transition the soul from the mortal realm into the eternal. Ancient texts and funerary literature such as the Book of the Dead underscore the significance of purity. Impurity was seen as a potential barrier to the soul's acceptance among the gods. If the ka was defiled, it could be rejected, condemned to an existence of unrest or oblivion. The ritual's intensity reflects a broader Egyptian worldview where maintaining order, Ma'at, was paramount. Ma'at represented truth, balance, and cosmic order, and the purification ritual was a reaffirmation of this principle. Any disruption or contamination was thought to invite chaos, which the Egyptians feared above all else. Therefore, cleansing the body was not simply physical hygiene, but an act of cosmic restoration, re-establishing harmony between the earthly and divine. Archaeological evidence supports the meticulous nature of these rites. Ancient tomb walls depict embalmers engaged in elaborate washing ceremonies, while inscriptions on coffins and papyri detail the prayers and invocations recited to invoke divine protection. The presence of sacred oils, natron, salts, and various resins alongside these rituals further illustrates their complexity and purpose. Beyond the practical and symbolic, the purification ritual also reinforced social and religious hierarchies. Only certain priests, often affiliated with specific temples, such as those of Anubis, the god of embalming and the dead, were permitted to conduct these ceremonies. Their knowledge was esoteric, passed down through generations, and shrouded in secrecy to preserve the sanctity of the rites. This exclusivity emphasized the sacred nature of death and the care required to traverse the afterlife safely. The emotional dimension of the ritual cannot be overlooked. For the living, watching the careful washing of a beloved relative's body was both a comfort and a reminder of the fragility of life. It was a moment charged with hope. Hope that through these sacred acts, the deceased would not only survive death, but flourish beyond it, joining the quested ancestors in eternal peace. In sum, the purification ritual before mummification was a multi-layered process blending physical cleansing with profound spiritual meaning. It was a carefully choreographed ceremony that served to protect the ka, cleanse the spirit, and restore cosmic order. Palm wine and Nile water were not mere liquids. They were conduits of divine power, instruments of transformation that bridged the mortal world with the eternal. This ancient practice embodies the essence of Egyptian belief in life after death, an unyielding faith that purity of body and spirit was essential for immortality. Through these rituals, the dead were honored and their journey safeguarded, preserving not only their physical form, but their very identity in the cosmos. It is a testament to the ancient Egyptians' sophisticated understanding of death as a sacred passage, demanding respect, precision, and unwavering devotion. The child who was purged with onions. Imagine a time when the boundaries between physical illness and spiritual affliction were blurred, and healing was as much about purging the unseen forces within as treating the body itself. In many ancient cultures, including Egypt and Mesopotamia, children who were believed to be possessed or cursed often underwent intense ritualistic treatments aimed at cleansing their spirits. One such practice involved the use of onions, not just as food or medicine, but as a powerful tool for spiritual purging. The child who was purged with onions embodies this profound and sometimes harsh intersection of medicine, religion, and cultural belief. Onions, with their pungent smell and natural irritant properties, were long valued in ancient healing traditions. Known for their ability to stimulate bodily functions, onions were used to induce vomiting, a physical expulsion seen as essential for cleansing the body of harmful substances and, by extension, the spirit of malevolent forces believed to inhabit it. The act of vomiting was not simply a bodily reaction, but a sacred ritual, an outward expression of the inner battle between purity and corruption. In the ritual context, a child suspected of possession might be given strong onion preparations, raw, crushed, or boiled, to provoke this purgative response. The process was often overseen by priests, healers, or spiritual leaders who believed that expelling these internal pollutants would restore balance and harmony, freeing the child from invisible chains. The child's suffering was framed as a necessary ordeal, a form of spiritual baptism through fire, where cleansing pain was the path to renewal. Historical texts and medical papyri from ancient Egypt detail various uses of onions in therapeutic contexts. They were not only dietary staples, but also medicinal agents prescribed for their antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, and detoxifying effects. However, their role extended beyond physical healing into the metaphysical realm. The bitterness and sharpness of onions symbolized their power to cut through spiritual impurities, making them an ideal substance for ritual purification. This practice reflects a broader worldview where the body was seen as a battleground for spiritual forces. Illness or unusual behavior in children could be interpreted as signs of possession, curses, or divine displeasure. Healing required more than just herbs and potions. It demanded rituals that addressed the unseen causes, reinforcing the belief that spiritual and physical health were deeply intertwined. The purging with onions also illuminates how ancient communities understood suffering and healing. The discomfort inflicted upon the child, though painful, was imbued with meaning, an essential step toward liberation and health. This notion parallels rites of passage or purification found in many cultures, where trials and tribulations serve as transformative experiences. Moreover, the use of onions demonstrates an early form of integrative medicine, combining botanical knowledge with spiritual practice. It shows how ancient healers sought to harness natural substances' physical effects within a ritualized framework to achieve holistic healing. In contemporary terms, the image of forcing a child to vomit through onion ingestion may seem harsh or even cruel, yet it underscores the profound human desire to protect and heal, using the means available within cultural and religious paradigms. The ritual was as much about community belief and shared understanding as about the child's individual health. Understanding this practice helps us appreciate the complexity of ancient healing and spiritual care. It reveals how cultures have historically navigated the mysterious terrain between body and soul, illness and possession, suffering and salvation. The Child Who Was Purged with Onions is a poignant reminder of the lengths to which societies have gone to restore wholeness and balance, blending the tangible and intangible in their quest for healing. In essence, the onion was more than a vegetable. It was a symbol and agent of purification, a tool wielded in the fight against spiritual corruption. The ritual purging it induced was a dramatic, visceral act that transcended medicine, embodying the ancient conviction that cleansing the body was inseparable from cleansing the spirit. Through this lens, we glimpse a world where healing was a sacred journey, and the bitter bite of an onion could mean the difference between captivity and freedom for a vulnerable child. The temple floor that was never walked on dirty. Imagine entering a world where every step you take carries divine weight, a realm where the ground beneath your feet is not just stone, but a sacred threshold between mortals and gods. In ancient Egypt, this world was the temple, a place of profound holiness where the divine presence was believed to dwell. Within these hallowed walls, the rules of purity governed every action, and none more strictly than the act of walking itself. Priests serving the gods understood that their feet, the very instruments connecting them to the earth, could carry impurity. To approach the sacred temple floors without meticulous cleansing was unthinkable, a transgression so severe that it invited harsh punishment, including exile. The temple floors were made of sacred stone, consecrated spaces that bridged the human and divine realms. To defile them with unclean feet was to threaten the balance of Ma'at, the cosmic order that kept the world in harmony. Before stepping into the sanctum, priests engaged in rigorous purification rituals, cleansing their feet with natron and lotus water. Natron, a naturally occurring mineral compound of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate, was prized for its cleansing and antiseptic qualities. It was a substance not just of physical purification, but spiritual power, capable of washing away both dirt and spiritual impurity. Lotus water extracted from the lotus flower, a potent Egyptian symbol of rebirth, purity, and creation, added a sacred fragrance and symbolized renewal with every wash. The combination of natron and lotus water was more than hygiene. It was a symbolic ritual. By immersing their feet in this mixture, priests physically shed any contamination from the outside world, preparing themselves to walk as vessels of divine will. This act of purification was essential because the temple floor was considered an extension of the gods themselves. Stepping on it unclean was akin to disrespecting the divine, breaking the sacred contract that maintained Ma'at. Historical texts and temple inscriptions underscore the gravity of this practice. The penalty for stepping on the temple floor without proper purification was severe exile, a social and religious death sentence. Exile meant not only removal from the temple's sacred precincts, but also from the community's spiritual protection and social order. This illustrates how tightly purity was intertwined with power, authority, and divine favor. This meticulous cleansing ritual highlights the ancient Egyptians' intricate understanding of sacred space and the human body's role within it. Purity was not abstract, it was embodied, manifest in the very feet that touched the temple stones. Every movement, every step, became a devotional act, a prayer enacted through physical care and respect. The practice also reveals a broader cultural and theological worldview. In Egyptian cosmology, the boundaries between the sacred and profane were rigid yet permeable. Maintaining these boundaries required constant vigilance, ritual, and discipline. The temple floor, as a liminal space, demanded the utmost reverence, with purification serving as the essential threshold to cross from the earthly to the divine. This ritual of cleansing feet with natron and lotus water was part of a wider spectrum of Egyptian purification rites, all aimed at restoring Ma'at and ensuring harmony between humans, gods, and nature. It symbolized renewal, protection, and readiness to serve in the sacred presence. In this light, the temple floor was never walked on dirty because every step was a sacred act, a conscious alignment with cosmic order. The priest's purification was a physical and spiritual preparation, a humble but powerful declaration of their role as mediators between worlds. So, envision the ancient temple's cool, smooth stone floor, pristine and pure, not merely by chance, but by centuries of ritual dedication and sacred discipline. This floor bore witness only to cleansed feet, each step echoing devotion, reverence, and the eternal pursuit of divine harmony. The woman who was banished for bleeding. Imagine a time when the very flow of a woman's body was seen not just as natural, but as a source of deep spiritual impurity. When menstruation was feared and misunderstood, casting women into isolation and hardship. In many ancient cultures, especially within strict religious societies, menstruating women were considered ritually unclean. This belief wasn't merely a social taboo, but a powerful spiritual doctrine that dictated the rhythms of women's lives, often relegating them to the margins until they could prove themselves pure again through rigorous cleansing rituals. This ancient perspective saw menstrual blood as a kind of spiritual contamination, a force that could defile sacred spaces and disrupt the delicate balance between the mortal and divine. In cultures such as ancient Israel, Mesopotamia, and parts of India, women during their menstrual cycles were confined to separate quarters or isolated areas, banished from communal and religious activities. These separations could last for days or even weeks, depending on the tradition, during which the woman was barred from touching others, entering temples, or participating in daily community life. The isolation was not only physical but psychological, fostering feelings of exclusion and shame. Historical texts like the Hebrew Bible's Book of Leviticus explicitly describe these states of impurity, prescribing that women must undergo ritual purification before re-entering public and sacred spaces. The woman who bled was not merely ill or weak, she was a source of contamination requiring cleansing to restore her place within society and the divine order. This codified impurity reinforced patriarchal control by regulating women's bodies and movements, intertwining spiritual beliefs with social restrictions. The cleansing rituals themselves were often elaborate and demanding. They could involve ritual baths, offerings, prayers, and days of seclusion. In some traditions, special priests or spiritual leaders oversaw these rites, emphasizing the seriousness with which menstrual impurity was regarded. The ritual bath was more than a physical washing. It symbolized the washing away of impurity, a spiritual rebirth, allowing the woman to reclaim her social and religious identity. These rites reaffirmed the cultural understanding that purity was essential not only for personal honor, but for maintaining cosmic and communal harmony. But these ancient beliefs had profound consequences on women's lives. Being banished during menstruation disrupted their ability to work, socialize, and worship, reinforcing their marginal status. In temple cultures where participation was essential for spiritual merit or social standing, exclusion during menstruation meant women were cut off from vital aspects of communal life. This periodic banishment echoed as a recurring cycle of stigma and vulnerability, impacting mental health and self-perception for many. The association of menstruation with impurity was often linked to fear and misunderstanding of the female body. Without modern medical knowledge, menstrual blood was mystified, and its power was exaggerated in spiritual terms. Some cultures even believed menstrual blood could cause harm or misfortune if it came into contact with men or sacred objects. These fears manifested in strict taboos that governed daily life, making menstruation a deeply isolating experience. However, not all ancient societies viewed menstruation solely as impurity. Some cultures acknowledged its connection to fertility and renewal, assigning it a sacred or mysterious status. Yet, the dominant religious frameworks in many societies maintained the association with impurity, especially where ritual cleanliness was paramount. In these contexts, the woman who bled was caught between natural biological processes and the spiritual demands of her community. Archaeological findings and historical writings reveal the tangible effects of these beliefs. Evidence of separate menstruation huts, purification facilities, and specific ritual objects underscore the institutionalization of menstrual impurity. These spaces, often secluded at the edges of villages or temples, were physical embodiments of societal exclusion, yet also sites where women endured and sometimes found communal solidarity amid shared hardship. Over time, the understanding of menstruation and purity evolved, but echoes of these ancient views persist even today in some cultures and religious practices. The legacy of ritual impurity continues to shape attitudes toward menstruation, influencing social norms, healthcare access, and gender dynamics worldwide. Reflecting on the woman who was banished for bleeding invites us to confront how deeply cultural narratives about the body influence identity and inclusion. Ultimately, this story of banishment and cleansing is not just about ancient rules. It is a powerful lens into how societies have sought to control and define womanhood through spiritual and physical boundaries. It reveals the tension between the natural cycles of the body and the cultural need for order and purity. By understanding these histories, we gain insight into the resilience of women who navigated these restrictions and the profound impact of ritual purity on human life across time. The woman who was banished for bleeding stands as a symbol of the intersection between biology, spirituality, and social power, a reminder of how deeply our bodies are entwined with a cultural meaning and how far humanity has come in redefining purity, inclusion, and respect for the natural rhythms of life. The house that was burned to purify a curse. The ancient belief that fire could purify and cleanse was a powerful force in many cultures. And nowhere was this more evident than in the practice of burning a house to purge a curse. In various societies, especially in traditional communities with strong spiritual frameworks, when a death was deemed unnatural, be it from violence, accident, or mysterious causes, it was feared that the restless spirit of the deceased could linger in the home, bringing misfortune or harm to those left behind. The house itself was thought to become a vessel of spiritual pollution, contaminated by the violent or untimely death. To counteract this, families sometimes resorted to drastic measures. They would ritually burn the entire home, or at least smoke cleanse it with incense and sacred herbs. This act was not merely practical, but deeply symbolic. Fire was believed to be a purifying agent, capable of transforming and cleansing not only physical impurities, but spiritual ones as well. The flames were thought to consume the curse, the sorrow, and the malevolent forces trapped within the walls, freeing the living from its dark influence. This ritual burning was more than a physical destruction. It was a communal acknowledgement of loss and a way to sever ties with the negative energies associated with the unnatural death. It was believed that by destroying the place where tragedy occurred, the lingering spirits would be forced to move on, and the household could begin anew, unburdened by the past. Smoke cleansing, a less severe but equally significant ritual, involved fumigating the house with aromatic substances like sage, juniper, or other locally sacred plants to drive away evil spirits and purify the air. However, the consequences of such rituals were profound. The family, already grieving, could be displaced and left homeless, their livelihood and security consumed by flames meant to protect them. The burning of a home was not a decision taken lightly. It was usually reserved for circumstances where the supernatural threat was considered real and immediate. This practice reveals how deeply intertwined spirituality and daily life were, and how belief in unseen forces shape tangible actions with lasting social and economic impacts. These customs demonstrate an ancient understanding of psychological and spiritual trauma, the acknowledgement that some deaths left marks beyond the physical, affecting the very space where life was lived. In the absence of modern mental health concepts, ritual burning acted as a form of collective healing, a cathartic gesture to cleanse grief and fear, even if it demanded great sacrifice. This ritual encapsulates the tension between survival, faith, and the struggle to find peace after tragedy, illuminating the profound lengths to which humans have gone to confront the unseen shadows of death. The cleanse that ended in death by poison. Imagine a world where healing was a delicate dance between medicine and the unseen forces of the spirit. In ancient times, many illnesses were thought to be caused not just by physical causes, but by spiritual impurities that clouded the body's essence. To combat these afflictions, some physicians prescribed powerful cleansing tonics, herbal concoctions designed to purge the body of illness through intense purification. These tonics, often made from potent and sometimes dangerous herbs, were believed to expel disease by cleansing both body and spirit. But this ritual of purification carried a deadly risk. Many patients died from overdoses, tragic casualties mistaken for failures of the soul rather than the limits of medicine. The use of such tonics was deeply rooted in a worldview where health and spirituality were inseparable. Ancient healers, who were often priests or spiritual guides, saw disease as a manifestation of imbalance or impurity. Their treatments combined physical remedies with ritualistic elements aimed at restoring harmony. The tonics they prescribed contained herbs known to induce vomiting, diarrhea, or sweating, reactions thought necessary to flush out toxins and evil spirits. But these herbs, like hellebore, aconite, or belladonna, had narrow therapeutic windows. Without precise knowledge of dosage or the ability to monitor patients, the difference between a curative dose and a lethal one was perilously thin. When patients succumbed to the toxic effects of these tonics, their deaths were often recorded and interpreted not as medical accidents, but as evidence of spiritual failing. The inability to withstand the purge was seen as a sign that the individual's their vital spirit, was too corrupted or weak to be cleansed. This belief reinforced a tragic cycle. Patients were subjected to increasingly harsh treatments in the hope of achieving purification, even as these treatments threatened their very lives. Texts from ancient Egypt, Greece, and Mesopotamia detail recipes and instructions for these cleansing preparations. Physicians combined knowledge of local flora with mystical incantations, believing that the herb's powers were intertwined with divine will. The lack of empirical testing and standardized dosages meant that treatment was as much an art of faith as a science of healing. Even today, archaeological and textual evidence reveals frequent warnings and precautions about these substances, underscoring their dangerous potency. The legacy of these practices reveals much about early medicine's limits and humanity's struggle to understand disease. The tragic deaths from cleansing tonics reflect a time when the sacred and the scientific were inseparable but often at odds. Misinterpretations of these fatal outcomes delayed advancements in medical understanding and perpetuated harmful beliefs about illness and purity. This story serves as a cautionary tale about the perilous path from ancient healing rituals to modern medicine. It reminds us that the quest to purify the body and spirit, noble in intent, can sometimes lead to unintended destruction when knowledge and caution fail to keep pace. In the echoes of these ancient deaths, we find the roots of medical ethics in the imperative to balance faith with evidence, hope with safety, and healing with humility. The ritual shaving that meant rebirth. Imagine standing on the threshold between two worlds, where the old self fades into shadow and a new purified identity emerges. In ancient religious traditions, especially among the temple priests of Egypt, this transformative moment was marked by a powerful and unmistakable ritual, the complete shaving of the body, including even the eyebrows. This act was not merely about hygiene or aesthetics. It was a profound symbol of death and rebirth, a tangible shedding of the old self to prepare for sacred duties and divine communion. In the context of ancient Egyptian spirituality, purity was paramount. The priests served as intermediaries between humanity and the gods, and their physical state reflected their spiritual readiness. Hair, with its natural growth and tendency to trap impurities, was seen as a potential harbor for spiritual defilement. Removing every strand was a radical but necessary step in achieving the spotless purity required to approach the divine. The ritual shaving was meticulous and thorough. Priests would strip away all body hair, head, face, arms, legs, and even eyebrows, effectively erasing personal identity markers and physical distinctions. This extreme removal served as a symbolic death of the old identity, the self that was bound to worldly imperfections and impurities. In its place, a reborn self could emerge, cleansed and ready to serve higher purposes. This rite of passage paralleled broader ancient concepts of transformation. Just as nature undergoes cycles of death and renewal, night turning into day, winter yielding to spring, the priest's shaving ritual enacted a microcosm of this cosmic pattern. By voluntarily submitting to this bodily erasure, priests embodied the themes of destruction and regeneration that were central to Egyptian theology. Ancient texts and archaeological evidence illustrate how deeply embedded this practice was within the religious calendar. Shaving was often performed before important ceremonies, festivals, or entry into sacred spaces, ensuring that the priest's body was a pure vessel fit for ritual action. It was a daily or cyclical reaffirmation of devotion, a continual rebirth that maintained the priest's connection to divine order. The removal of eyebrows had particular significance. Beyond their role in facial expression, eyebrows were thought to shield the eyes from spiritual contamination. By shaving them off, priests symbolically exposed themselves fully to divine sight, demonstrating openness and vulnerability before the gods. This radical transparency was a testament to the depth of commitment required for their sacred roles. The ritual was more than symbolic. It had psychological and social dimensions. Shaving away all hair dissolved personal identity markers, reinforcing the priest's role as a servant of the gods rather than an individual with personal desires or attachments. It created a uniform appearance that distinguished the priestly class and visually separated them from lay people, signaling their special status and responsibility. From a practical standpoint, maintaining a hairless body also had hygienic benefits in a hot climate, reducing pests and infections. But in the ancient Egyptian worldview, the spiritual significance far outweighed mere practicality. Every physical act was deeply intertwined with metaphysical meaning, and shaving was an embodied prayer of purification and renewal. This ritual death and rebirth echoed in many other cultures as well, highlighting a universal human impulse to mark transformative moments with profound physical change. Whether through shaving, cutting, or other bodily modifications, the body becomes a canvas upon which identity, belief, and ritual are inscribed. Understanding the ritual shaving of priests opens a window into how ancient people conceived of purity, transformation, and the sacred. It reveals a worldview where the boundary between the physical and spiritual was fluid and permeable, and where the human body was both a symbol and instrument of cosmic order. The priest who surrendered every hair did more than cleanse his skin. He enacted a profound metaphor of death and rebirth, demonstrating that to serve the divine, one must first let go of the self. This intimate and intense ritual underscores the power of ritualized bodily acts to shape identity, create sacred space, and connect the mortal to the eternal. In this light, the ritual shaving becomes a powerful story of transformation, sacrifice, and the continual quest for purity that defined ancient priesthood. It challenges modern notions of identity and spirituality, inviting us to reflect on how physical acts can carry deep symbolic meaning and serve as gateways to renewal and transcendence. The sacred scribe who refused to cleanse. Imagine a world where ritual purity was not merely tradition, but the very foundation of sacred order, where refusing to cleanse was not rebellion, but a direct affront to divine law. In ancient Egypt, the temple was a realm governed by strict codes of purity, and those who served within its walls were bound by unyielding rituals. Among them, the scribes held a vital role, custodians of knowledge, recorders of sacred texts, and mediators between gods and mortals. To stand apart from ritual cleansing was to sever this sacred connection, and one scribe's defiance became a haunting lesson in the price of such a breach. This scribe, whose name was deliberately expunged from the temple records, refused to participate in the ritual purification that priests and temple officials performed daily. His protest was not just a personal act, but a symbolic rejection of the spiritual order that sustained the temple's sanctity. To the Egyptians, ritual cleansing was essential not only to maintain physical cleanliness, but to ensure the soul's purity, aligning the individual with Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth and balance. His refusal was met with grave consequences. The temple priest pronounced a curse upon him, a divine condemnation that severed his connection to the community he served. Stripped of his sacred role, the scribe was removed from his post, effectively erased from the spiritual and social fabric of temple life. But the punishment extended beyond professional exile. When he later died, his body was found unburied, abandoned outside the sacred grounds, denied the proper rites that guaranteed safe passage to the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian belief, burial rites were essential for the soul's journey beyond death. Without these rituals, the dead were condemned to wander restlessly, trapped between worlds, unable to join the eternal cycle. To be left unburied was the ultimate spiritual punishment, an eternal erasure, a denial of both earthly and divine remembrance. The story of this sacred scribe encapsulates the profound power of ritual purification in Egyptian culture. It was not a mere ceremony, but a binding covenant linking the individual to the divine order. Ritual cleansing reaffirmed loyalty to the gods, maintained Ma'at, and protected the community from chaos and spiritual corruption. His defiance represented a rupture in this covenant. By refusing to cleanse, he symbolically invited impurity, threatening the sacred balance that temple rituals sought to uphold. The curse, removal, and posthumous dishonor reveal the harsh realities of violating such cosmic laws. This account is also a window into the complex social dynamics within ancient Egyptian religious institutions. It illustrates how authority, spirituality, and community enforcement were intertwined, with rituals serving both religious and social functions. The erasure of the scribe from records was not just punishment, but an attempt to cleanse the temple's history itself and removing the stain of descent. Archaeological and textual evidence confirm that the Egyptians placed immense importance on ritual purity, especially among temple officials. Cleansing rites involved not only washing with sacred substances like natron and lotus water, but also symbolic gestures aimed at expelling spiritual impurity. These acts prepared the individual to enter divine presence and perform sacred duties. The scribe's refusal disrupts this sacred cycle, highlighting the inseparability of body, spirit, and community in Egyptian cosmology. It reminds us that in this ancient world, purity was power, and defiance bore consequences that transcended life itself. In reflecting on this story, we glimpse the weight of spiritual discipline in a civilization where order and chaos were locked in eternal struggle. The scribe's fate stands as a chilling testament to the cost of breaking sacred bonds, a narrative etched not only in history, but in the collective memory of a people devoted to maintaining divine harmony at all costs. The mummified cat that had to be cleansed first. Imagine an ancient world where even the animals closest to the gods were treated with a reverence that transcended human care. A world where sacred cats, revered as divine protectors and companions, underwent elaborate purification rites before their journey into eternity. Among these sacred creatures, the cat held a special place in Egyptian culture. not merely as a pet, but as a symbol of divine favor, mystery, and protection. When a cat died, it was not simply buried, but mummified with extraordinary care, beginning with a ritual cleansing that was as intense and meaningful as any royal human's preparation for the afterlife. The mummification of cats in ancient Egypt reveals much about how intertwined religion, daily life, and animal worship were. Cats were seen as embodiments of the goddess Bastet, protector of home and hearth, goddess of fertility, music, and joy. Because of this divine association, cats were regarded as sacred emissaries, mediating between the human and divine realms. When a cat died, it was not only a loss but a sacred event demanding solemn rites to honor its spirit and secure its passage into the afterlife. Before the embalming process began, the cat was ritually cleansed, washed in water infused with lotus flowers, a symbol of rebirth, purity, and the sun's daily resurrection. This lotus water was not ordinary. It was charged with spiritual significance, believed to wash away earthly impurities and prepare the cat's body for transformation. The lotus itself held a central place in Egyptian cosmology, representing the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Washing the sacred cat in lotus water was thus a symbolic act, cleansing not only its physical form, but also purifying its spiritual essence. The embalming process that followed was meticulous and carried out with reverence. Cats were embalmed using resins and oils, much like human mummies, but often with even greater delicacy. The techniques aimed to preserve the body's form and essence, enabling the cat's spirit to thrive in the afterlife. Archaeologists have found cat mummies carefully wrapped in linen, sometimes adorned with jewelry or amulets, underscoring their importance. Some cats were buried in elaborate tombs or within temple precincts, reflecting their exalted status. The purification and mummification of cats also served a protective purpose for the living. The cat's divine favor was believed to shield households and temples from evil spirits and disease. By ensuring the cat's proper passage through ritual cleansing and embalming, the community maintained its link to the goddess Bastet and the cosmic order she upheld. The sacred cat was more than an animal. It was a guardian, a symbol of balance and protection. This ritual care highlights the Egyptians' profound respect for the natural world and their belief in the sacred interconnectedness of all life. The cat's purification was not a mere practical measure, but a spiritual necessity, embodying the ancient conviction that cleanliness and sanctity extended beyond humans to the animal kingdom. Such reverence challenges modern distinctions between human and animal, sacred and mundane. Furthermore, the mummified cat's cleansing rituals reveal the broader Egyptian worldview in which purity was essential to the maintenance of Ma'at, the divine order and balance governing the universe. Everything, from the smallest creature to the Pharaoh himself, had to be in a state of ritual purity to sustain harmony. The elaborate preparation of a cat's body illustrates how this cosmic principle permeated all aspects of life and death. In excavations, cat cemeteries have been uncovered near temples dedicated to Bastet, filled with thousands of mummified cats. These cemeteries are a testament to the scale and significance of feline worship, reflecting centuries of ritual practice. The very act of cleansing and preserving these cats ensured their spirits could continue to intercede on behalf of the living, maintaining the sacred bond between humanity and the divine. The mummified cat that had to be cleansed first invites us to reconsider how ancient cultures viewed animals, not just as companions, but as spiritual beings deserving of ritual honor. It reminds us that purification was a profound act of respect, preparation, and transformation, connecting the earthly and divine in a seamless tapestry of belief. Through this ritual, the cat transcended its mortal existence, becoming an eternal guardian of sacred spaces, a living symbol of purity and divine favor. The ancient Egyptians' devotion to these sacred animals challenges our modern perspectives on life, death, and sanctity, revealing a civilization deeply attuned to the spiritual resonance of all beings, great and small. In this light, the story of the mummified cat's cleansing is more than a tale of ancient embalming. It is a window into a world where purity, reverence, and the sacred rhythms of life. The Purification Bowl, buried with every noble. The ancient Egyptian civilization was a world where life and death intertwined in a complex dance of ritual, belief, and profound spirituality. One of the most fascinating customs was the burial practice of wealthy and noble Egyptians who were interred with a purification bowl, an object that held far more than mere water. These bowls were filled with natron and oils, substances rich with symbolic and practical significance, believed essential to continuing the sacred process of spiritual cleansing even after death. This burial tradition offers a deep glimpse into how the Egyptians conceived of purity, the afterlife, and the eternal journey of the soul. In ancient Egypt, cleanliness and purification were paramount, not just in the physical world, but in the spiritual realm as well. The concept of purity was connected closely with the god Osiris, the lord of the underworld and resurrection, and with Maat, the goddess representing truth, balance, and cosmic order. To ensure a successful passage into the afterlife, the soul had to be free of impurity, sin, or anything that might upset this delicate cosmic balance. This was no mere metaphor. The Egyptians believed in literal purification processes that the deceased had to undergo to meet the gods and live eternally. The purification bowl was an essential tool in this sacred rite. Typically made of alabaster or fine ceramics, these bowls were carefully crafted and filled with natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and other salts. Natron was a cornerstone of Egyptian purification rituals, revered for its drying and cleansing properties. It was used in mummification to desiccate the body, removing moisture to preserve the physical vessel for eternity. But its role extended beyond the material preservation of flesh. Natron symbolized spiritual cleansing, the washing away of impurity and corruption. Accompanying the natron in these bowls were fragrant oils, extracted from native plants such as myrrh, cedar, and frankincense. These oils had potent ritualistic and symbolic meanings. Oils also represented rebirth and regeneration, echoing the cyclical nature of life, death, and resurrection central to Egyptian theology. The combination of natron and oils was therefore not accidental. It was a deliberate blend of substances designed to both physically and spiritually purify. The act of burying these bowls with the noble dead was a profound statement about the continuity of existence. The Egyptians did not view death as a final end, but as a transformation, a gateway to an eternal life where the soul would continue its journey. The purification bowl was a ritual provision, a sacred tool intended to accompany the deceased through the perilous stages of the afterlife, ensuring that their spirit remained clean and acceptable before the gods. It was as if the process of cleansing that began in life would be sustained beyond the grave, a perpetual purification to safeguard the soul's immortality. Ancient Egyptian funerary texts, such as the Book of the Dead, emphasize the importance of purity and the power of ritual cleansing. Spells and instructions guide the deceased on how to purify themselves and pass the judgment of Osiris, who weighs the heart against the feather of Maat. Failure in this judgment meant destruction of the soul and eternal death far worse than the physical one. The purification bowl symbolized a lifeline in this cosmic trial, a way to maintain the sanctity and balance required to proceed. Excavations of noble tombs, such as those in the Valley of the Kings and other elite cemeteries, frequently uncover these bowls, often found near the body or in ritualistic placements around the tomb. Their presence testifies to the high status of the deceased and the care taken to prepare for the afterlife of them. The materials of the bowls themselves, often alabaster, a precious stone, reflect the importance of the object. The smooth, translucent surfaces of alabaster suggested purity and clarity, aligning perfectly with the bowl's purpose. The oils placed in the bowls were sometimes carefully mixed according to recipes known only to temple priests, highlighting the specialized knowledge required to perform these sacred rites. These concoctions were likely kept secret and passed down through generations, guarded to ensure the potency and sanctity of the ritual. This secrecy underscores how seriously the Egyptians took the process of purification and the afterlife journey. Moreover, the ritual use of natron and oils was not limited to burial. In life, these substances were used in temple rites, daily purification ceremonies for priests, and in the anointing of statues of gods. This continuity of use bridges the gap between mortal existence and divine eternity, suggesting that purification was a lifelong pursuit, culminating in the final rites of death and burial. The Purification Bowl also hints at the deeply personal relationship Egyptians had with death and the afterlife. Unlike many ancient cultures where burial was a communal or generalized practice, Egyptian tombs and funerary goods were highly personalized, reflecting the status, wealth, and spiritual needs of the individual. Including a purification bowl meant investing in the hope of a smooth transition and eternal peace. It was a tangible expression of faith in the human desire to transcend mortality. This practice further reveals the sophistication of Egyptian spirituality. It was not a faith based solely on fear of death, but one imbued with hope, order, and continuity. Purification was not punishment, but preparation, an ongoing process that transcended physical existence. The bowls symbolized this eternal cycle of cleansing, death, and rebirth. In summary, the burial of purification bowls filled with natron and oils was a vital part of the ancient Egyptian belief system, reflecting their complex understanding of purity, death, and the afterlife. It was a ritual act deeply embedded in the social and religious fabric of the civilization, designed to ensure the soul's successful passage and eternal life. Through these bowls, the Egyptians reached across the veil of mortality, seeking to maintain spiritual cleanliness in a world beyond our own. This enduring custom illustrates the profound human need to find meaning in death and to prepare for what lies beyond. The Purification Bowl, simple yet charged with immense significance, stands as a testament to the power of ritual, faith, and the eternal quest for transcendence that shaped one of history's greatest civilizations. The cleansing that was actually an exorcism. The ancient world was a place where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual were fluid and deeply intertwined. Illness, misfortune, and mental distress were often seen not simply as biological or psychological conditions, but as manifestations of supernatural forces. Central to this worldview was the practice of spiritual cleansing, a ritual far more than mere purification. It was an exorcism designed to drive out demons, malevolent spirits believed to inhabit or afflict the human body and soul. These cleansing rites, documented across many ancient civilizations, were intense, often brutal, and sometimes lasting for days, reflecting a profound struggle against unseen forces that threatened life itself. The concept of spiritual cleansing as exorcism was rooted in the belief that many ailments and misfortunes were caused by external, hostile entities. In ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and later in Greco-Roman and Near Eastern cultures, diseases, madness, and even bad luck were interpreted as symptoms of demonic possession or spiritual contamination. The human body was a battleground, and the rituals to cleanse it were armed conflicts against invading spirits. Unlike modern medicine, which focuses on physical causes, these ancient rites address the metaphysical origin of suffering. At the heart of the exorcism ritual was a combination of chants, prayers, incense smoke, and purging medicines. The chants were not mere words but powerful invocations and commands believed to weaken and expel the demon. They often included names of gods, spirits, and mythological figures who were called upon to protect the afflicted and banish evil. These vocal ceremonies were delivered with heightened intensity, rhythms, and sometimes terrifying invocations, creating an atmosphere charged with spiritual energy. Incense played a critical role in the cleansing process. Sacred smoke was thought to purify the environment and the body, creating a barrier against malevolent forces. The choice of incense, myrrh, frankincense, and other aromatic resins was deliberate, each carrying symbolic and practical significance. Smoke was believed to penetrate the invisible realm, disrupting the demon's hold and clearing the way for healing. Temples and homes alike were filled with this sacred haze during cleansing rituals, immersing everyone present in a sensory battleground between light and darkness. Purging medicines were another crucial element of these exorcisms. Often derived from potent herbs with emetic or laxative properties, these medicines force the body to expel physical substances believed to be the vessel of the spirit's corruption. The purges could be severe, sometimes lasting several days, reflecting the belief that persistence was necessary to overcome a demon's resistance. These medicines were administered carefully by priests or healers who combined empirical knowledge with spiritual authority. The intensity of the purging was seen as a sign of the exorcism's effectiveness, though it could be physically exhausting and even dangerous for the patient. The duration and severity of these rituals varied, but historical records reveal that some exorcisms lasted days or even weeks. The patient might be subjected to continuous chanting, smoke inhalation, and repeated doses of purging substances. Such endurance was interpreted as both a test and a sign of the afflicted person's spiritual strength. Only through this rigorous trial could the demon be forced out, allowing the soul to be restored and the body healed. This brutal aspect of spiritual cleansing was not merely punishment, but a reflection of ancient cosmology, where balance and order, known as Ma'at in Egypt or cosmic harmony in Mesopotamia, had to be preserved. Demons represented chaos and corruption, threatening not only individuals, but the very fabric of society and the universe. Cleansing rituals were acts of cosmic restoration, reaffirming divine order by eradicating impurity. The social role of exorcists and priests was therefore immense. These figures held dual power as both medical practitioners and spiritual warriors. Their knowledge of chants, rituals, herbs, and sacred spaces was guarded closely, and their authority was unquestioned. In some cultures, only they could perform the rituals necessary to protect individuals and communities from spiritual harm. Their work was revered, feared, and essential to the health of the living and the sanctity of the dead. Archaeological findings in ancient texts provide vivid evidence of these cleansing exorcisms. Clay tablets from Mesopotamia contain incantations and ritual instructions, while Egyptian papyri describe detailed procedures involving spells, offerings, and symbolic actions designed to banish spirits. In Greece and Rome, similar practices persisted, evolving with cultural changes, but retaining the core belief in spiritual possession and cleansing through ritualized suffering. The psychological and physical toll of these exorcisms on patients must not be underestimated. The combination of fear, intense ritual, prolonged fasting or purging, and sensory overload could exacerbate illness even as it aimed to cure. Yet, within the context of their worldview, these acts represented hope and salvation, the possibility of reclaiming the self from forces that threaten to destroy it. In modern times, we look back at these ancient spiritual cleansings as a window into how humanity has grappled with the unknown and the invisible. They reveal a world where medicine, religion, and magic coexisted inseparably, each shaping human understanding of health and disease. Though methods have changed, the underlying human impulse to confront and expel suffering, whether physical or spiritual, remains unchanged. The cleansing that was actually an exorcism was thus more than a ritual. It was a fierce, transformative battle fought on multiple planes. It demanded faith, endurance, and the belief in a world beyond what the eyes could see. It is a powerful reminder of the ancient human journey toward healing, where purification meant not only washing away dirt, but confronting demons, restoring order, and reclaiming the sanctity of body and soul. The festival where everyone was cleaned in public. Imagine a city awakening to a day unlike any other, streets buzzing with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of chanting priests echoing from grand temples. This was the Feast of Opet in ancient Egypt, a festival unlike typical religious ceremonies, where the spiritual and the communal merged in a remarkable ritual of purification. During this festival, citizens gathered in large numbers to wash themselves publicly in the waters of the Nile, which were believed to become temporarily sacred, infused with divine power. This mass cleansing was not simply about physical cleanliness, but a collective spiritual renewal, a shared act of preparing both body and soul for the blessings of the gods. The Feast of Opet was held annually in Thebes, one of the most important religious centers of ancient Egypt, dedicated to the god Amun, his consort Mut, and their son Khonsu. Central to the festival was a grand procession where the statue of Amun traveled from Karnak Temple to Luxor Temple, symbolizing the god's journey to rejuvenate the pharaoh's divine power. But beyond the royal spectacle, The people themselves participated actively in rituals that reinforced their bond with the gods and with one another. One of the most striking elements was the communal washing in the river. As the Nile's waters were considered the source of life and renewal, the river became a living symbol of the gods' blessings. During Opet, the Nile was believed to be especially charged with sacred energy, turning the everyday act of washing into a holy rite. Priests, dressed in white linen robes, stood by the riverbanks, supervising the ritual. Their chanting filled the air, weaving spells of protection and purification as the citizens immersed themselves in the cool, flowing water. This collective purification was deeply symbolic. In ancient Egyptian belief, cleanliness was inseparable from holiness. Washing in the Nile during Opet was an outward sign of internal renewal, a washing away of impurities, misfortunes, and spiritual burdens accumulated over the year. It was a reset for both individuals and the community, aligning them anew with Ma'at, the divine order and balance that governed the universe. The festival also reinforced social cohesion. The act of washing together in a sacred context fostered a sense of unity and shared purpose among the people. It was a moment where social divisions blurred, and everyone, from nobles to commoners, engaged in the same sacred act under the watchful eyes of the priests. This collective experience strengthened communal identity and the people's connection to their gods and their land. Historical accounts and archaeological evidence reveal the meticulous preparations for Opet. Temples were cleaned and adorned, and sacred boats were prepared for the procession. Priests performed multiple purification rituals, including personal bathing and shaving, to ensure their own sanctity. Their chants and prayers served to amplify the spiritual potency of the event, creating an atmosphere charged with divine presence. Beyond its immediate religious significance, the Feast of Opet's mass washing ritual also had practical benefits. In a hot climate, bathing in the Nile could refresh and invigorate the body. The festival's timing, often aligned with the inundation of the Nile, linked physical cleansing with the natural cycles of renewal and fertility essential for agriculture and survival. This festival shows how ancient Egyptians intertwined natural phenomena, religious belief, and communal practice into a seamless whole. The sacred waters of the Nile became a stage for spiritual rebirth, social harmony, and divine blessing. The collective washing was more than ritual. It was a profound expression of the Egyptian worldview that cleanliness, both physical and spiritual, was essential to life and cosmic balance. By immersing themselves together in the sacred Nile, the people of ancient Egypt participated in a living tradition that transcended the mundane. The Feast of Opet was a reminder that renewal was not only personal but communal, a shared journey back into harmony with the gods and the world. It was a day when water became a sacred conduit, cleansing not just the skin but the soul, and when the simple act of washing became a powerful act of devotion and transformation. Understanding this ancient festival invites us to reconsider the meanings of purity, community, and ritual in human culture. It highlights the enduring human need to come together, to cleanse, to renew, and to connect with forces greater than ourselves. The Feast of Opet stands as a timeless testament to the power of shared sacred acts, where every drop of water carried the promise of rebirth and every voice joined in the song of the divine. The night they washed the statues of gods. Imagine a temple cloaked in the stillness of night, where shadows deepen and silence reigns. Yet a sacred ritual comes alive in the flickering torchlight. Every evening in ancient Egypt, while the world outside rested, temple staff undertook a profound act of devotion. They bathed the statues of the gods. These statues were far more than mere stone or wood. To the Egyptians, they were living vessels, physical embodiments of divine presence on earth. The ritual bathing of these sacred images was a daily ceremony that reaffirmed the intimate bond between humans and gods, a sacred dialogue enacted with water, perfumes, and cloths. The gods' statues were carefully housed within temple sanctuaries, protected from the outside world, yet each night they were brought to life through ritual care. Temple attendants washed the statues with pure water, an element symbolizing cleansing and renewal. This water was no ordinary liquid. It was often infused with sacred herbs or oils, enhancing its purifying and sanctifying qualities. The act of washing was meticulous and reverent. designed to remove not just physical dust, but spiritual impurity that might accumulate throughout the day. After washing, the statues were gently dried and anointed with fragrant oils and perfumes. Scents such as myrrh, frankincense, and lotus oil filled the air, and aromas chosen for their sacred significance and divine association. These perfumes symbolized not only purity, but the presence of life itself, breathing vitality into the stone forms. The anointing was an act of honoring the vase, acknowledging their sacred power, and renewing their spiritual essence each night. Cloths, often finely woven linen, were used to delicately wipe and dress the statues, emphasizing the intimate care bestowed upon these divine figures. This tactile connection, touching, washing, perfuming, was more than symbolic. It was a profound recognition of the vase as living entities, deserving of the same care and respect as any revered family member or ruler. This nightly ritual underscores the ancient Egyptian understanding of divinity as immanent, accessible, and deeply connected to the physical world. The gods were not distant or abstract. They lived among the people, and their statues served as their earthly homes. By cleansing and anointing these statues, temple staff ensured the gods remained pure, energized, and receptive to worship. Textual and archaeological evidence, including temple inscriptions and ritual manuals, reveal the complexity and importance of these ceremonies. The act of nightly bathing was intertwined with cosmic order, reinforcing Ma'at by keeping divine presence free from corruption. Any neglect could invite chaos, spiritual imbalance, and divine displeasure. Furthermore, this practice highlights the seamless integration of ritual, art, and theology in ancient Egyptian culture. The statues were masterpieces of craftsmanship designed to house the god's essence. The ritual bathing renewed not only the physical object but the spiritual power it contained. The ritual's significance extended beyond the temple's walls. It reflected broader themes of purification, renewal, and respect for life that permeated Egyptian religion and daily life. By treating the statues as living beings, the Egyptians affirmed a worldview where sacred and mundane were intertwined, and where care for the divine was a continuous, loving responsibility. In imagining this nightly scene, the soft sounds of water, the scent of incense, the gentle hands of temple attendants, one senses the profound devotion and reverence that defined ancient Egyptian spirituality. It was a world where the gods were ever present, ever pure, and ever cared for, their statues a living bridge between heaven and earth. This nightly bathing was a powerful ritual of renewal, an eternal act of worship that ensured the god's presence remained vibrant and potent, guarding the temple, the people, and the cosmic order through the quiet hours of darkness. The tainted midwife who had to be purified. Imagine a world where the sacred act of bringing life into the world was shadowed by deep fears and strict spiritual codes, where midwives, revered as healers and guardians of birth, could themselves become marked by the darkest forces if a child was stillborn. In many ancient and traditional societies, stillbirth was not only a tragedy, but also a spiritual crisis. Women who delivered stillborn infants were seen as carrying a heavy burden of spiritual contamination, a taint that endangered their own purity and the sanctity of the community. This belief thrust midwives into a painful liminal space, requiring intense purification before they could resume their vital roles. Midwives occupied a paradoxical position. They were honored as life-givers and healers, yet their proximity to death in childbirth exposed them to profound risks, both physical and spiritual. When a birth ended in stillness, the midwife was believed to absorb or attract the impurity associated with that loss. This impurity was thought to weaken her spiritual defenses and disrupt the cosmic balance she helped maintain through her sacred duties. The midwife's body and soul were seen as contaminated, threatening not only her health but also the safety of future mothers and newborns she might assist. Across various cultures, from ancient Mesopotamia to parts of Europe and Asia, midwives who faced stillbirths were subjected to strict isolation. This period of banishment could last for days or weeks, during which the midwife was removed from contact with others, confined to designated cleansing quarters or seclusion huts. This enforced solitude was both a physical and symbolic quarantine, designed to prevent the spread of spiritual impurity and to protect the broader community from misfortune. The isolation underscored the seriousness of the contamination and the community's need to restore order and safety. The purification rituals midwives underwent were as rigorous as they were sacred. They often involved daily ritual baths in holy or blessed waters, sometimes infused with herbs known for their purifying properties, such as frankincense, myrrh, or sage. These baths symbolize the washing away of spiritual corruption, renewing the midwife's body and spirit. Alongside physical cleansing, prayers, chants, and offerings to protective deities were integral to the process, invoking divine forgiveness and restoration. The rites were designed not only to cleanse, but also to strengthen the midwife's connection to sacred forces, reaffirming her role as a trusted mediator between life and death. The midwife's purification was a communal concern as much as a personal one. Childbirth was a pivotal event in any society, tied to lineage, survival, and spiritual continuity. Ensuring the midwife's purity was crucial to maintaining the trust of mothers and families and safeguarding the sanctity of future births. The rituals surrounding stillbirth and midwife purification reflected broader anxieties about death, impurity, and the fragile boundary between life and the unknown. This spiritual contamination belief carried deep psychological weight. Midwives might have experienced guilt, shame, or fear, internalizing the stigma of stillbirth even though it was beyond their control. The imposed isolation could be traumatic, exacerbating grief for the lost child and the midwife's own social alienation. Yet these purification rites also offered a path to redemption, a structured process by which midwives could reclaim their honor, reintegrate into their communities, and resume their sacred work. Historical records and folklore often depict midwives navigating these challenges with resilience and ritual wisdom. They were custodians of ancient knowledge about birth, death, and healing, balancing the demands of the physical and spiritual realms. The purification after stillbirth was part of their complex role, reminding us that birth, while life-giving, was also fraught with risks and mysteries that ancient societies sought to control through sacred tradition. In many ways, the Tainted midwife's purification ceremony reveals the intersection of gender, spirituality, and health in traditional societies. It shows how women's bodies were sites of both power and vulnerability, shaped by cultural narratives that both revered and constrained them. The rituals underscored a profound respect for the forces of life and death, emphasizing that those who bridge these realms must themselves be ritually prepared and protected. Reflecting on the Tainted midwife's experience invites us to appreciate the enduring human quest to find meaning and order amid the uncertainties of childbirth and mortality. It highlights the spiritual frameworks that shaped ancient responses to tragedy, blending care, fear, and reverence in rituals of cleansing and renewal. Ultimately, the story of the midwife who had to be purified after delivering a stillborn child is a testament to the profound challenges faced by women who stood at the threshold of life and death. It is a reminder of the delicate balance between purity and impurity, inclusion and exclusion, that has shaped human rituals and relationships throughout history. Through understanding these ancient practices, we gain insight into the complex tapestry of belief, health, and gender that continues to influence how societies honor and care for life's most vulnerable moments. The Pharaoh who fasted and washed for 40 days. Imagine a substance so powerful that it was woven into the very fabric of ancient Egyptian life, a powder that cleaned the body, purified sacred spaces, and shielded the soul from malevolent forces. This was natron, a naturally occurring mineral mixture of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and salt. To us, it might seem like a simple cleaning agent, but to the Egyptians, natron was much more. It was a magical purifier, a sacred substance that transcended the physical and entered the spiritual realm. In ancient Egypt, cleanliness was not just about hygiene, it was a fundamental element of spiritual health and cosmic order. The Egyptians believed that physical purity was directly connected to moral and spiritual purity, a reflection of Ma'at, the principle of truth, balance, and harmony that governed the universe. Any impurity was a threat to this order, inviting case and spiritual contamination. Natron, therefore, was more than soap. It was a divine tool wielded in the battle against disorder. Used extensively for washing the body, natron was a cornerstone of daily life. People rubbed it on their skin, mixed it with water to create cleansing pastes, and used it in bathing rituals. Its abrasive yet gentle nature helped remove dirt, oils, and sweat. But beyond these practical effects, natron's alkaline properties made it a potent symbol of purification. The sharp cleansing quality of natron was thought to banish not only physical grime, but spiritual impurities as well. By washing with natron, Egyptians believed they could ward off evil spirits, curses, and diseases, threats invisible to the naked eye, but very real in their world. This belief extended beyond the personal into the sacred. Temples, statues, and ritual objects were regularly cleansed with natron to maintain their sanctity. Priests performed elaborate purification ceremonies using natron to prepare themselves and the holy spaces for divine interaction. This ritual washing ensured that the god's presence would be untainted by the impurities of the mortal realm. The process was meticulous and imbued with deep reverence, reflecting the Egyptians' understanding that cleanliness was a prerequisite for spiritual communication and protection. Natron was also integral to the embalming and mummification processes, where its drying and preserving qualities played a literal role in defying decay and death. This use further connected natron to the divine, as preserving the body was essential for the soul's journey into the afterlife. The sacred nature of natron was evident in the fact that it was often sourced from specific regions, like the dry lake beds of Wadi el-Natrun, considered holy and carefully guarded. These locations became centers of ritual production and spiritual significance. The magical properties attributed to natron were reinforced by its presence in Egyptian mythology and texts. It was linked to cleansing spells, protective amulets, and healing rituals. The substance was believed to repel malevolent entities and purify the wearer or user from harmful influences. This mystical aspect elevated natron from a mere household item to a sacred medium through which humans could engage with divine power. Moreover, natron's multifaceted uses, ranging from practical hygiene to sacred protection, illustrate the Egyptians' holistic worldview, where the physical and spiritual were inseparable. Their everyday life was suffused with rituals that bridged the material and the metaphysical. Natron was the perfect embodiment of this connection, a substance that cleansed the skin and shielded the soul. In sum, natron was not just soap, it was a symbol and instrument of divine order, a sacred agent that maintained the harmony of the individual and society. Its use reflected a profound belief in the power of purification as a spiritual defense and a cosmic necessity. The ancient Egyptians' relationship with natron reveals a civilization that saw the sacred in the mundane and understood that true cleanliness required more than water and scrubbing. It required the magic of divine essence. This powerful, multifaceted substance shaped Egyptian culture, religion, and daily routine for millennia, leaving a legacy that echoes in modern understandings of cleanliness and ritual purification. Natron was, quite simply, the soap that was never just for skin, it was the cleanser of body, temple, and soul. The soap that wasn't just for skin. Imagine a substance so integral to ancient Egyptian life that it transcended simple cleaning to become a symbol of purity, protection, and divine power. Natron, a naturally occurring mixture of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and other minerals, was much more than an ancient soap. It was the sacred cleanser of body, soul, and space. The Egyptians used natron not only to wash their skin, but to sanctify temples, preserve bodies, and protect against spiritual corruption. This humble mineral embodied the seamless blend of the practical and the mystical that defined ancient Egyptian culture. Natron was harvested primarily from dry lake beds in the Nile Delta and the deserts of Egypt, where it appeared as crystalline deposits shimmering under the sun. To the Egyptians, it was a gift from the gods, a substance imbued with the power to transform impurity into purity. Its cleansing power was renowned. When mixed with water, natron created a soap-like substance capable of removing physical dirt, oils, and grime. But its use went far beyond the physical realm. In daily life, natron was the cornerstone of Egyptian hygiene. People applied it as a soap to wash their bodies, believing it cleansed not only the skin but the spirit as well. Cleanliness was closely linked to Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth, balance, and order. Maintaining bodily purity was essential to living in harmony with the Shwaz and ensuring a favorable destiny. Using natron was a ritual act, a daily reaffirmation of the wearer's commitment to spiritual and physical cleanliness. The ritual importance of natron is most vividly seen in its central role in mummification. Embalmers use natron to desiccate and preserve bodies, preventing decay and preparing the deceased for the afterlife. This process was not merely scientific but deeply spiritual. By drying the body, natron expelled corruption and decay, ensuring the Ka and Ba, the spiritual components of the soul, could recognize and inhabit the preserved form. Natron's ability to halt decay made it a bridge between life and eternity, a sacred agent of immortality. Temples and sacred spaces were also cleansed with natron. Priests sprinkled and washed altars, statues and floors with natron-infused water, purifying these places of worship to keep divine energies pure and accessible. This cleansing was thought to repel evil spirits and maintain Ma'at within the sacred precincts. Natron's presence in temples underscored its role as a protector, not just against physical dirt, but against spiritual contamination. Ancient texts and iconography reinforce natron's magical status. In spells and incantations, natron is often mentioned as an ingredient for purification and protection. The Book of the Dead includes references to natron and rites meant to guard the deceased against malevolent forces on their journey through the Duat, the underworld. It was believed that natron's purifying essence could shield souls from spiritual decay and corruption, just as it did with bodies. The Egyptians' multifaceted use of natron reflects their holistic worldview, where the material and immaterial were inseparable. Natron was more than a cleaning agent. It was a sacred tool wielded to uphold the delicate balance of existence. It connected the mundane act of washing with profound religious meaning, linking the individual to the cosmic order. This mineral also influenced Egyptian art and culture beyond its practical use. Natron contributed to the brilliant white surfaces of painted reliefs and statues, symbolizing purity and divine light. Its presence in burial rituals and temple ceremonies marked it as essential to both life and death, a reminder of the constant need for renewal and protection. In essence, natron was the soap that wasn't just for skin. It was a substance charged with spiritual potency, a divine cleanser that bridged worlds. Through its use, Egyptians engaged in a daily act of sacred hygiene, maintaining their bodies and souls in harmony with the gods. This extraordinary mineral reveals how a simple natural resource can become a cornerstone of civilization's spiritual and practical life, embodying the quest for purity in all its dimensions. Reflecting on natron's role in ancient Egypt, we see how cleanliness was never just about appearance, but about cosmic balance and divine favor. The soap that was much more than soap teaches us that the everyday rituals of washing and cleansing carry deeper meanings, acts that renew, protect, and connect us to something greater than ourselves.